So, what are some of the do's and don'ts about being a podcast guest?
Yeah, most certainly. So I'd say a couple of the biggest things when you're going out there and being a podcast guest is people like to hear stories where they want to learn more about your background. So you're going on the podcast, you're sharing stories. Like previously, I was going through basically the whole story from 2015 to now looking to 2024 and how I started my company. So people can, I find, relate more to stories. And you're going through when you're sharing your stories, you're almost going from point A to point B. So back in 2015, I had no idea about podcasting. Now in 2024, I'm running this podcast agency. So just to give you a specific example, that's what it looks like. So sharing those stories, I would say making sure that you have good quality podcasting equipment, whether that's having good lighting, whether that's having a good webcam, whether it's having a good podcast mic, just making sure you have all of that. Like right now I use the Blue Yeti mic. That's my preference. There's tons of mics that you can buy out there. I spend probably about $100 on my mic. You can buy mics that are cheaper. You can buy mics that are more expensive, but just making sure that you have a good quality one, that you're not just recording either with like your AirPods in or just not even having a mic and recording on your computer. So that would definitely be a don't. I've tried to do interviews myself, interviewing people, and they've been in their car on their iPhone or whatever phone that they may have, and the quality isn't going to be that good. I've had people try to do it while they're driving, making sure that you're sitting in a nice quiet spot within your house, making sure that there's not that much noise going on. Certain things like sometimes there might be construction outside my house. Well, I know that's going to be picked up on my mic, so I'm just going to go through and reschedule the interview. Hopefully, the next time I book it, maybe it's a week or two out, that's not going to be an issue because the microphones are going to pick up a lot of that background noise. Another aspect would be not being overly promotional on the podcast. I find that some people almost look at it as like an infomercial where you're going on there and you're just spewing your product, you're spewing your service, where there's always going to be a time and place on the podcast where you can talk about, okay, like this is where you can learn more about our company if you are interested in working with us. But I've had guests where interviewing them where they're just like over the top promotional. I'm like, I get it, like you have a good service offering, but like now it's becoming kind of annoying with how much you're promoting it. And I think the audience can see through that. And then I would say the other aspect of being a good quality guest is just getting better at speaking and being more comfortable with it. And this just comes with time. It's not something that you go on your first podcast and you're going to be like, okay, like I'm an excellent guest. Or I'm sure Aaron, when you did your first couple of interviews, I'm sure it was a little nerve wracking or a little anxious. And that's just going to come with more practice that you do. And even for myself running this podcast agency and being on podcasts and hosting my own podcast back starting again in 2015, I still wasn't 100% comfortable going out there and doing it. And it was super uncomfortable in the beginning. And in order to get better, so I signed up for like a Toastmasters club, which is just a public speaking club where you go through and you just practice public speaking. I was still in college at the time, so I had the opportunity to take a public speaking course. And what that really looked like is you would give about a 10 to 15-minute speech about once a month for the 3 or 4 months that we were there. So got more practice doing that. And then obviously the other students that they were giving their speeches as well. So it was just something that I worked on, and just not having that expectation when you're going out there and being a guest that the very first interview that you do as a guest or as a host is going to be perfect. Just continuing to work on it. But again, the big things would be making sure you have a good quality mic as a guest, making sure that you're being concise with, not so much being concise, but sharing stories on your interviews. And then the don'ts would be not having a good quality mic, being overly promotional, showing up late or not showing up on time, or just missing the interview entirely. That's always not a fun experience for the host or the guest as well. Sometimes there might be a mix up here and there depending on the time, but if you just blow it off, and I've had clients that have done that and I end up just stop working with them. I'm like, if you can't show up for your interview and there's a lot that goes on the host background for the host to prepare and the guest doesn't show up, that's just not a good look. Again, occasionally it might happen. You just happen to forget about the interview, but you don't want to make it something that goes on all the time. But yeah, those are really the big do's and don'ts as a guest. I think everyone has a short story to share. It's more or less just working on getting that story out of you. And that really only comes with more practice and going out there and doing more interviews.
So, rule number one is don't record a podcast while walking on the beach on your phone and talking on your phone. What about, you said you were talking about having a good quality mic, but there's also those, what is it, the pop filter? What is it called? Where there's something to, on the other end of the spectrum, from having a good quality mic to having too much, what is it, mouth sounds? coming through. One of the things that drives me crazy when I'm listening to a podcast is uh, lip smacking, or it sounds like somebody's breathing, like they've got the microphone stuck right up their nose. You know what I'm talking about? Is there uh, is there a filter, or is there a way to help filter out that those mouth sounds?
Yeah, I'd say there's two ways. Like you mentioned, having the pop filter, and that's relatively inexpensive. I mean, you can go on Amazon and buy that. You can either put it like directly on your mic. I think a lot of them that you can just clip directly onto your desk where you're recording your interview, and then it'll be basically you put it in front of your mic so that it's blocking like the. It's almost like as it sounds a popping filter as you make pop sounds with your mouth. It's kind of hard to describe. It's similar to what you were describing, like with your lips smacking and then the breathing there as well. Another aspect would be not putting the mic like so close to your mouth, where you want to keep it anywhere from like, I know like Aaron, both you and I have it like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 inches away from our mouth, just something similar like that, where yes, it's close to you, but you're not like literally like right on top of it. And sometimes I think people see like radio shows or people are like right on top of their microphone, where their equipment's probably very expensive that they do. So I try to keep it again about 6 to 8 inches away. And then I have like a little, almost like a little filter or a little, I don't know, I put on top of my Blue Yeti mic where it's like a styrofoam piece, and that just helps block out the sounds as well. And I can't remember if it came with the mic or I had to buy it separately, but there's definitely tools that you can use. And what I would do would be, once you've done your first interview, just go back through and listen to it. And you hear what Aaron had mentioned, where you're hearing the lip smacking or you're hearing the breathing. Okay, I need to move the mic from back a little bit, or I need to move myself back a little bit, or I do need to go out there and invest in the pop filter. And again, the pop filter, it should be relatively inexpensive. It should be like maybe $10, $20 on Amazon. It's really not that bad.